In this lesson, we are going to learn how to perform Java debugging with VS Code. And following are the highlights of this lesson, what we are going to learn. First, we will learn what is debugging, what are breakpoints, these are two elementary things, how to run a program in debug mode, how to start, stop, and continue or resume the debugger, how to set breakpoints. Exploring the run view during the debug session, we would explore the variables and the breakpoint section. And also we will go through inline values during debugging. So this is very beginning of Java debugging. So only the basics we will understand here. We will discuss more advanced things in the upcoming lessons. Now what is debugging? Debugging basically is a method of finding and fixing the bugs or issues in a program. While debugging codes in IDEs like VS Code, the debugging process allows to run a program interactively while watching the source code and variables during execution. We will understand it better when we do it practically. Now, what are breakpoints? Breakpoint is an intentional pausing or halting place in a program put in place for debugging purposes. When the program is run in debug mode, its execution is paused or suspended at a particular location based on the breakpoint created. This would be also clear when we perform the debugging practically. Now, let's go to the code and start debugging using VS Code. Now here I have a sample project Java debugging with VS Code, and under its demo package I have opened a sample file called debug.helloworld.java. Now this is the Java code and I'm going to run this particular program in debug mode. Now in order to debug a particular class in VS Code, how we can debug it? We can click the drop down, we can click on debug Java, or we have this option run or debug just above the main method. We can click the debug. Now if I use any of these options, or what I can do, on top of the file I can just right click and select this debug Java. So if I choose any of these options, the program would run but it won't halt anywhere. I need to place breakpoints. So how to place breakpoints in VS Code? It's pretty simple. If you hover on the left hand side, right, you can see this red dots. So suppose I want to place a breakpoint at here. I just need to do a click. Say maybe in another line, I place a breakpoint, then again at line 10. So these are the breakpoints. We can get rid of the breakpoints also if I just click on them once again, or I can right click and do remove breakpoint. So this is the way we can place breakpoints and we can remove them. There are many other options. We are just discussing the basics here. Now let me run this program in debug mode. So I'm going here, debug Java. Now you can see the program is going to run in debug mode. Yes, the program has run and you can see the highlighted line at line number 6. So what is happening over here? The debugging has started and the program flow or the control flow has halted at line number 6 where we have the first breakpoint placed. And you can see the color at the bottom of the editor, it has changed from blue to orange. So the program is run, the breakpoint is hit, this particular breakpoint, here it is paused. Now few things we have to observe. On the left hand side, the run view, it has changed. Earlier it was a little bit different. Now we have multiple sections, variables, watch, call stack, breakpoint. So the basic things I am going to explore over here is variables and breakpoints. And on the top, you can see this particular part has appeared. It has multiple buttons. Now this is movable. If you drag here from the left to right and to some extent up and down, not entirely, you can move it if required. Now these are some very important buttons. I'm not going to discuss all of them, but some of them. The first one is continue or F5, the shortcut key. Second is step over. Third is step into. Fourth is step out. So step over, step into, step out, I am not going to discuss in this particular lesson. Rather, I am going to focus on continue, restart, and stop. So we have run the program in debug mode and this particular breakpoint is hit. Now, if I want to continue from here, what will happen? This is my continue or resume button. Resume generally comes in Eclipse. If I continue from here, what will happen? The remaining line would execute. If there is any breakpoint, there the control would pause. Otherwise, it would complete the entire flow and finish. So let me continue from here. As you can see, these lines have executed and the program has halted at the next breakpoint. Similarly, if I click over here, it would come to the next breakpoint, that is line number 10. If I press it again, the entire program would finish. So that is one way. Now let me run the program in debug mode once again. Again the breakpoint is hit. Now I have the continue button. The other buttons I want to show here is stop. If I stop it, the program will terminate here immediately. So that is the feature of stop. Again, let me run this program in debug mode. Again, the breakpoint is hit. We have seen what is the use of continue. We have seen what is the use of stop. We have restart over here. So if we restart, what will happen? This particular program will stop, but it will start again in debug mode. Let me try that out. Now, as you can see, the breakpoint has come back again over here. So what we have done, we have run a program in debug mode. We have seen how to continue, how to stop a program, how to restart a program. Now let's look at the left hand side. We have the variable section. We have this local variable, it is shown here, and we have the breakpoint section. First, let's focus on the variable section. I have my breakpoint that is hit at line number 6. Let me continue. Now you can see the value of I was initially 10, then 100 was added, so it should be 110. If I look here, I is 110. So this variable sections, whatever variables we are using within the scope, it shows them. Now there are multiple options from here. We can set value, we can copy value, and we can do many other things, but I'm not going into the details. This is the basic usage of the variable section, where we can see the values of the different variables. And along with the variable section, you can see over here, just beside each and every line, say line number 6, I equals to 10 semicolon. After that we have I equals to 110. It's not a code, it's inline value. So while we debug, beside each and every line, the variable's values are shown. These are called inline values. At times it helps in debugging. Currently the program flow is halted at line number 8. So the next line, I equal to I minus 20. If I equals to 110, if I press the continue button here, what will happen? Logically, the flow would come to line number 10. This line would be executed. So it should be 90. Let me click over here, continue. As expected, you can see the value of I, it is changed to 90. Both here and here. As both represent the value of I, so the value has to be same in both places, right? So we have explored the variable section. We have seen what is inline values during debugging. Now let us discuss about the breakpoint section, which is at the bottom. Under breakpoint section, we have uncaught exceptions, caught exceptions. These are basically exception breakpoints, which we would discuss in other lessons. For the time being, let's have a look into the ones at the bottom. So here, if I expand it, these are the 3 breakpoints. They actually represent line number 6, 8 and 10. Now these are the lines here, 6, 8 and 10, where I have placed the breakpoint. So this is the breakpoints view, where what I can do, I can remove the breakpoint from here. So if I remove line number 6, you can see it is gone. I can disable the breakpoints. Say this belongs to line number 8. If I click over here, what would happen? It would be disabled. If I stop the program now, and if I run this in debug mode, you can see although the breakpoint is there, but it is disabled. So the program has halted at the next breakpoint, that is line number 10. So from here we can remove the breakpoints, we can disable the breakpoints, and again we can enable the breakpoint. Now let me use the feature restart. So what will happen? If I run this again, this program will stop, but it would restart and the flow should stop here because I have enabled the breakpoint. It was disabled earlier. Let me use restart. As you can see over here, as expected, at line number 8, the program flow is halted. So at a very high level, what we have done, we have run a Java program in debug mode, and we have seen how to use the continue, stop, restart button, what is the variable section, what is the breakpoint section, and how to view the value of the variables using inline view and the variables view. There are many other important things. So there are many other important parts while we are debugging the code, like using the features like step over, step in, step out. We will learn those in the upcoming lessons. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to control the program flow during Java debugging using VS Code. And for that, there are three important features: step over, step into, and step out. These three things we will focus on. These three things we will learn. Now, I am inside my VS Code editor and I have opened a sample program, debug-person.java. This particular program have certain piece of code. I mean, the logic is not very much important, but before we dive into those three important navigational features, let me go through the code very briefly. So initially this code has just a simple for loop. We are creating an array. So this part I won't focus on. The main part is here from line number 20 to line number 27. Here what I have at line number 21, I'm populating a person list from a utility class called data_util. And this getPersonData, this method is invoked. If I go inside this particular method, let me press Ctrl and move over on top of this method and click on this. So what I have here, I have a sample method called getPersonData. What it is doing, it is creating certain person objects, as you can see over here, and there is name, age, country, everything it is populating. Now all these person objects it is adding to this particular list called person list. Here I am doing all the additions to the list. Now finally this person list is returned. So if I go back to the main program here, at line number 21, what we are doing, we are getting a list of person objects. Then we are printing it. And then we are calling another method, data_util.getPersonMap at line number 23. It is returning a map of integer and person object. Let me go inside person map similar way. So here what I am doing, I have two person objects and then I am creating a map called person map. Finally I am putting a key, that value is 1, and then a person object and then returning the person map. Let me go back to the main method once again. So here if I reiterate, at line number 21 I am getting a list of person objects. At line number 23 I am getting a map of person objects, and then at line number 25 I am trying to get one object from this particular list. So the first item from the list is returned, and that person object's name, age is printed at line number 26. Similarly at line number 27, what I am doing, from the list I am returning one particular object here and then trying to print the name, etc. So the logic of this program is not very important. At a high level we are getting a list of person objects, a map of person objects, and then we are printing certain values. So this is a code which would help me to demonstrate these features of step over, step in, and step out. That way the code is written. So the logic is not very much important, but we should be having a high level idea what the program is doing. Now let me get into the actual features like step over, step into, and step out, how to use them, what is their benefit, etc. Now what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to place certain breakpoints, maybe at line number 21, line number 23, and say line number 26, and run this program in debug mode. So right click, debug Java, so now as you can see at the bottom the color has turned to orange, and here this particular line, line number 21, where my first breakpoint is placed, that is highlighted, and this particular bar that has appeared. Here there are these three very important buttons: step over, shortcut key F10 in Windows; step into, shortcut key F11; and step out, shortcut key Shift plus F11. Now first we will discuss step over. This is the most frequently used. So what step over does, say I am at line number 21 where the breakpoint is hit, the control flow is paused. If I press step over or press F10, the control flow or the program flow will move to the next point. It would execute the current line, that is line number 21, and move to the next line, that is line number 22, and wait over there. So let me click step over. As you can see, it is paused at line number 22. It has executed line number 21. In similar way, if I keep on pressing this one by one, the debugging would continue and the control flow would move to the next line. So this is the use of step over. Now, apart from step over, the other two important features are step into and step out. These are actually more or less interrelated. Suppose here at line number 23, I have one method invocation. Now I want to move into this particular method called getPersonMap, and I want to debug line by line. So if I want to go inside this one, I have to press step into. Let me do that. I'm going to this particular button and clicking step into. So you can see the control flow has come to this particular method getPersonMap, and it is waiting at line number 52. So here what I can do, I can execute the entire method. I can debug it line by line. Say I'm pressing step over one by one and see what is happening, what is the value of the objects, how the map is getting populated, and etc. Or what I can do, that I don't want to go line by line here. I have seen what is happening. Say I'm at line number 56 or 53 or wherever, but I want to go back. Then this step out would be very handy. What step out does, if you are inside a particular method when you are debugging and you have step into a particular method and you want to come back from where you went inside the method, then if you do step out, it would go back to the place from where you have come. So if I press step out here, what would happen? Whatever the remaining lines in this method, those would get executed and the control would go back from where it has come. So if I step out now, as you can see, now I have come back to the line from where I invoked or used step into. The exact same place I have come back. So now what I can do, I can move step over line by line and see what is happening. And I can continue line by line, or if I'm not interested, I want to finish the entire program execution, I can press this particular button, continue or F5. Then what will happen? The entire program would get executed and it would finish. So let me run the program in debug mode once again. Now here again the control is paused at line number 21. And in this way, these three methods, step over, step into, and step out, these are elementary features of debugging, and these are very important whenever we debug any particular program and we want to navigate to different methods or different sections of the code and understand how the program is working. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to inspect variable values in different ways using VS Code. Now here I have a sample program called debug and here I have created some primitive values like integer I equals to 0, j equals to 100, etc. and different other data types and collections. So at line number 21, you can see there is a list of person objects created. At line number 23, there is a map of integer and person objects created. And finally, these are printed. Now, at the very end, I'm going to place a breakpoint, line number 27. And one thing we would ensure that in the breakpoint section, these two uncaught exceptions and caught exceptions, we are going to uncheck them in case they are checked. And I'm going to run this in debug mode. So under this run and debug, I'm clicking this run and debug button. The breakpoint should be hit at the very last line. So as expected, at the very last line, the breakpoint is hit. Now, how to inspect the different variables? So here, the very first thing what we can do, we have this variables section. Here under local variables, what we have the integers, the primitive values that are shown. Now, here I have created a number array at line number 15 and I have populated with 1000 items. So I have the number array over here. It's showing that yes, it has 1000 elements. If I expand this, this is the value where I can see the different values or different items inside this. Next, we have this person list. If I scroll over here, this is my person list. Now here I can see the person list. This is an array list. Its size is 8 If I expand this, I have all the items here. All the 8 items I can view from here. Now, if I expand this, the individual items, depending on their data type, we can see the values. So I can see this is the person object, age, country, name, all this I can view over here. So to inspect variables, one option we can see is the variable section. From here, I can see the different values. Let me close this. Now, let me expand this person map and scroll down. Here I can see 2 items. I can see the key and value. See, 0 and hash map node, 1 and hash map node. But the value, if I see here in the code, this map should contain integer that I can see as key. But the value should be person. But what about this person? So here if you see this I like icon, you click on here, click to expand. If I expand this now, you can see this is the key, this is the value. Expand it further, here you can see all the details of the item over here, the value over here. So in this way, we can view this collection. The last thing is the first person, the person object. If I see over here, it's just a person object. Let me expand this. So it shows all the fields over here. So variable section we have seen. Another way to inspect the variables is the inline view. If you see this code right now, the breakpoint is hit and program is pausing. Beside each and every line, whatever values we have, if you see line number 20, the value of I is shown over here. Line number 21, this person list is shown over here, but it is not that much user friendly. It's only showing the object type and the size, right? So it is good for primitive values. For collections and all, this inline values or inline view is not that much effective. Apart from variables and inline view, there is another utility which is watch. Now in watch, what we can do, we can add expression and we can inspect the values over here. Suppose I have I and j over here and I want to check the value of I can add I over here, press enter. Okay, I is 100. I can check any custom expression like I plus j. That is also fine. Let me add any custom collection. Let me copy this and here removing this plus Control V, enter. Here similar kind of view we will be seeing, like this is the item and within this item I can see the detailed view over here. So we have checked variables section, we have checked watch, we have checked inline views. Let me elaborate a little bit on the watches. Watch I can add over here and I can remove them also. I can remove all of them together by clicking over here, remove all expressions. Now from here, if I click the variable, I can right click and here I can say add to watch. In that way also, it would be added to watch. From variable section also, if there is a variable, say I or j, it is shown. If I right click, there I can do add to watch. And individually, I can remove them from here, like remove expression or remove all expression. So watch, variable and inline views we have covered. Another way is to use the debug console. Suppose I want to view a particular element and from here whatever the default values it is showing, that is fine, but I want something custom. Say for example, here in watch I have seen, okay, this is my person list. I want to see, in case it is a big one, maybe I want to see the 200 variables or 300 variables or whatever it is. What I can do here, I can go to debug console and I can write person list dot get. Anyways, I don't have the 200 elements here, but if I enter a custom index, right, and press enter, it would be giving me the output over here. And if I expand this, I can see all the values. So debug console is another way to inspect the variables. Overall, at a high level, we have seen 4 options: using the variable section, using the watch section, using the inline view, as well as the debug console. So this features really helps us to understand the state of the program or the state of the variables in a useful way. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to change the variable's value during debugging. So here I have a debug person class, and what I am doing at the beginning of the main method, I have certain integer variables like I equals to 0, j equals to 100 and all. Then I have different number array creation logic, and then I have certain collections created. Like here I have a list of person objects, I have a map of integer and person objects. So overall this program has certain primitive values populated like ij, and also certain collections objects populated like person list, person map, etc. Now what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to run this program in debug mode, and during debugging I'm going to change the values of the different variables, whether it is primitive or whether it is collection. So here let me place a breakpoint maybe at line number 15 and run this program in debug mode. For that I can go to run and debug and directly click this button. There are other options also. Anyways, let me continue with this one. So as expected, the breakpoint is hit, and if I see the inline values, right, I equals to 100 because I was initialized to 0, then j was initialized to 100, finally I is I plus 100, that is why I equal to 100. So here what I can do, let me get off this watches, I don't need this, I have placed this while debugging some other programs. What I can do over here, this value is shown here. If I right click, there are multiple options shown. Set value. If I click over here, it becomes editable. Let me type the custom value that I want to set, press enter. Now it is 200. You can see over here also in the inline view, this got changed. Another thing I can do, instead of right clicking, if I double click over here, this becomes editable. Let me put 300. Press enter. Now here this is getting changed. This is also in the inline view, these values are getting changed. So for primitive variables we know how to change the values. Let me proceed further. I want to change a list object over here. Let me place a breakpoint over here, and I'm going to click on continue, so the program halts over here. Now this person list we have here, and what I want to do, I want to change this person list. So this is the first item. If I expand, it has age 40, country US, name Steve. So I'm going to change the value in two ways. Age, I'm going to click over here, or what I can do, let me expand it again, right click, and here I have set value. So that is other way. So I'm setting this value as maybe 100 or 1000, press enter. So this first item, age is 1000, country I can change, but here I will make a tweak. This time I'm not going to change from here. I'm going to use debug console. Now here in debug console, if I go, what I have here, person list. So let me type person list. Fine, it is coming. Press tab, dot get first item. Now here I need to set the country or name, whatever. I'm changing this as India. Go to the end, press enter. Okay, I have made one typo. It should be set country. Instead of that, I have just given set. So let me type it again. Copy this, Ctrl C, paste it over here, and here I am typing country and press enter. Now you can see it is returning void. That is natural, it's a setter method. But if I go over here, I can see the countries change. So these are the two ways of setting the variable values during debugging. One is you go to the variable section, you select the variables and change their values, and another is a dynamic way, which is a debug console. This is programmatic way and more powerful way. So these are the two basic ways of changing variables values during the debugging session. VS Code has a good support for debugging stream and lambda based operations. To demonstrate the feature, I have a sample code here, and this program is called debug stream and lambda. What I am doing at line number 10, I have one string array where multiple elements are there, xy, xyz, etc. I'm printing the array. Then at line number 12, I'm performing certain operations. First, I'm creating a stream from the array, and then there is a map operation. What it does, it converts all the items to uppercase. Then there is a filter operation where we are filtering the elements only with length 1. Finally, we are sorting it and converting to the array. Now, if I run this particular code, let me just run it. You can see the output. Whatever elements had length greater than 1 like XYZ, ABC, PQR, etc. those are filtered and remaining are capitalized, and finally these are sorted. Now how to debug that in case of stream operation, how to understand what is going on. Whenever you want to debug a particular line which is having lambda operation, you can place a breakpoint over there and run the program in debug mode. Let me run it in debug mode. Now, once the program is run and the breakpoint is hit, you can see VS Code automatically places these gray dots on this different operations. I can see inside map, filter. So these are the operations. Now, if I want to go inside this debug operations, I can click on them, then it becomes activated. So what I will do now, I'll just click on continue so that I can see what is happening. See, now this particular breakpoint is hit and I can see the item X. If I continue again, I will get the next item. You can see the item is changed to Y. Similarly, if I want to debug another operation, I can place the breakpoint over here. So it's Y. The next operation would be filter. So let me press the continue. Now you can see it is converted to uppercase and I am in filter and the cursor is here. It's showing caps Y. Let me press the continue once again. From here, it should come here and it should show the third element, that is XYZ. So here you can see the XYZ is there. So in a nutshell, what happens if you place a breakpoint, a line breakpoint, then VS Code provides you the gray dots inside the lambda operations. Now you can click on those gray dots, then those will become normal breakpoints. So in this way, we can debug the lambda or stream-based operations in VS Code pretty easily. Step filtering is a useful debugging feature which helps us to filter out certain classes or packages during the debugging process. When we are stepping through the code during debugging, we can filter out certain things with this particular feature. Let me explain this with an example. Here I have a sample piece of code debug calculator, and at line number 18, I'm going to place a breakpoint and run this program in debug mode. Let me click this run and debug button. As expected, you can see the breakpoint is hit now. What I can do over here, I can step into this particular method, this add method of calculator util, or I can step over. Let me step over here. Here also you can see this is just a System.out.println. I can move to the next line, but there are scenarios, say by mistake also, if you press this step into, what will happen? The JDK source code will open. Now, whenever we are debugging our own piece of code, we may not want to go inside the library codes. We just want to run or debug our own code only. So in such cases, we have to filter out certain packages. I need to tell the editor, VS Code in this case, that when I am debugging, I don't want to go inside third-party libraries or JDK libraries. You just stay within my code for debugging purpose. So in that case, what we need to do? Let me close this debug session and close this library class also. So in this case, in order to inform VS Code to filter out certain class, we need to use the launch configuration, the launch.json file. That is one way. There are multiple ways. I'll cover them one by one. Let us use launch.json. This is basically the launch configuration. So I have clicked the launch.json here, create launch.json, and if I go to the Explorer window now, you can see on the right hand side this launch.json is created. But if we go to the Explorer, what has happened? Whatever package structure or folder structure I had, there this .vs code directory is created and this launch.json is created. And if you notice here, what it contains the configurations. And if you notice here, what it has, type, name, request, main class. So here, whatever classes I had, for all of them, VS Code has created this entries, this configurations. This is for launch current file. and these are all specific, all class specific configurations. So I don't need all of them. I'm going to remove most of them apart from the first one. Let me delete this. So here I have this single configuration. What it would do, it would launch the current file. Let me click on Ctrl S. So the file is saved. Here I have the debug calculator, and if I go to run and debug, you can see this one at the top. This shows the different configurations available. So this launch current file, whatever I have here, is this one. Let me change this text so that you can understand. I have changed it to custom launch current file. You can see this has changed. Let me drag it a little bit. Okay, now I have to select this particular file, and if I want to debug, I have to debug from here. Let me click on this. Now also, if I do step over and press this step into, you can see same problem is there. But what we are doing right now, we are using the launch.json. Now this launch.json is the place where we can add step filters. We can tell VS Code to follow certain steps. So in order to do that, we need to provide a comma, and here we need to mention the option. So one of the option is mentioning step filters. Let me type S. You can see this is context sensitive and it provides multiple options. Just click on step filters over here. Now VS Code actually does most of the magic for you. Here what it is mentioning, step filters. These are the classes that it is going to skip. It is going to skip the JDK classes, the JUnit classes if applicable, and also it is mentioning skip synthetics, skip static initializers, skip constructors, etc. These are mentioned as false. That is not important, I mean, in the context of the current discussion. So if we just select skip filters and keep this default options, it would be skipping this JDK and JUnit classes while debugging. Let us test that out. Now just select this particular class and click over here. Make sure we are using this custom configuration, because this custom configuration only has the step filters, right? Let me run this again in debug mode. Click on step over. Now I am going to press step into. Now you can see it's not going inside the JDK libraries. If I press step into, it would go into the custom methods. But if I go to the very next line and press step into over here, it would just behave like step over, meaning it would not go inside the filtered out classes or packages. Let me stop the debug session over here and go to launch.json. So in this way, we can use the step filters. Now, there are other options as well. To explain that, let me first comment out this step filter sections. So here I'm commenting out the step filter part. Now if I run using the same configuration, let me click on start debugging. Sorry, I have not selected the correct class. So I have to select the class and click over here, start debugging. Again the breakpoint is hit, step over, step into. Now it's going to the library class. So the step filter is gone. Let me close the debug session and come back here. Let me close this class, this launch.json. So launch.json is right now ineffective. So we found out one way to use the step filters. There is other way also. For that, we are going to use settings.json. In order to do that, we need to go to view command palette. Here, if you type settings, you can see multiple options. Default settings, user settings. I'm referring to the JSON ones. User settings, workspace settings. We can add step filtering related entries in any of this settings file. I can do it at workspace level. I can do it at user settings level. I can do it at default level also. Let me do it at workspace level. If I click over here, I have this settings.json. This settings.json, where is it? If I go to the Explorer, it is here under .vs code. Now, if I go to command palette again, and if I type settings, had I opened this user settings JSON file, let me open it. Now you can see it is at the default user location. I'm not going to use it. This settings is only the workspace related settings. Here also we can customize the step filtering. Now this particular settings.json is also context sensitive. just type to double quotes, every option is coming. I don't exactly recall what was the option name. But if I say skip, now I can see multiple options. If you see at the bottom, java.debug.settings.stepping skip classes. So this is the debug settings where in the stepping part, what are the classes we need to skip, that option is provided. Just select that. Now here I need to provide what are the classes or the packages I need to skip here. What you can mention over here, the standard configuration is like this. From the VS Code documentation, JDK tells skip the JDK classes from the default system bootstrap class path like rt.jar, etc. Libraries basically tells skip the classes from the application libraries, whether it is Maven, Gradle, etc. And also you can add custom packages as an additional entry. Now we have added this settings.json. Let me go back to the class which I was running and run it in debug mode. I'm going to use the same configuration just to show you what is the impact and debug this. Step over, try to step into. Now you can see we are getting the same effect. I mean, we added the step filter in the launch.json file, then we commented it, but we configured the setting.json over here and mentioned the options. Now the effect is same. So we found out two options. One is using the launch.json and mention the filtered classes or packages over there. Another is the settings.json, and this settings.json can be customized at multiple levels. It could be default settings, it could be user level settings, it could be workspace level settings. So that is all for now. This step filtering is a pretty handy feature while doing the debugging, but in VS Code, as the documentation or the examples are not very user friendly at this point of time, knowing these details would definitely help you a lot. In this lesson, we are going to learn what is conditional breakpoint and how to use that. Whenever we use breakpoints, normal breakpoints or line breakpoints, and we place them in the particular code, then the program flow halts over there. But in certain scenarios where we need to pause the code in certain condition in a specific criteria, there this conditional breakpoint is very useful. So conditional breakpoint is a breakpoint where we can mention some expression. If that expression's value is true, then the flow would pause there, otherwise it would continue. Let me explain this with an example. Here I have a sample piece of code, debug person details iteration, and at line number 11 I'm calling a method which is returning a list of certain object called person. Starting from line number 12, you can see there is a for loop, and here what I am doing, I'm trying to get that person from the particular list using that for loop, and I'm trying to print. Let me try to run this particular code from here. Run Java. Now in the terminal you can see there is a class cast exception. The exception is string cannot be cast to the person object at this particular line, that is line number 14. So here when I'm trying to get this person object from this particular list, I'm getting a class cast exception. Now in situations like this, what we can do, we can place a normal breakpoint over here and we can just run it in debug mode like this, say debug Java. Now what we can do here, we can click on continuing. This breakpoint would hit multiple times, as many times as the for loop will iterate, and when the problematic scenario occurs, we will come to know. But this has an issue. If the list or the collection is pretty huge, like there are thousands of elements or hundreds of elements, and at a particular point the exception is thrown or the problem is there, it would take a while for us to reach that point. So in such cases, this conditional breakpoint becomes very handy. So if I do continue over here, see, the program has run. If I do it again, it is running. So we are not getting the place where the actual problem exists. So what we can do over here, let me stop this particular debug session. Let us turn this particular breakpoint into a conditional one. If we right click here, we have this edit breakpoint option. If I click, you can see this particular drop down. If I expand this, expression, hit count, log message, three options are there. We will focus on the expression part only. Now here what I want to do, I want to place a condition on which the flow of the program should be paused. So the scenario when the object that I get from this person list is not type of person, then I want to see what is the problem, what is coming over here. So let me put the expression over here. So I have typed in the expression where the person list dot get I, meaning the element in the for loop, is not instance of person. In that case, I want to pause. So press enter. Now you can see the icon of this breakpoint is changed. The expression condition is this. If we want, we can edit it once again from here, and here under this section run and debug, you can see under breakpoints, this is the breakpoint it is showing. Here also the icon is little bit different. Now let us run this piece of code in debug mode. Now last time when we ran, it stopped at the first item, then we continued, then it went to the second item. Here it will pause at the specific loop where the type of this object is not person. Let's see. Click on debug Java. Now the control has paused. We can see it has printed 3 items. The fourth item has some problem. Now what is the problem? To know that, we know from the inline variables I equals to 3. So if I go to the variables section here, I can see this third item. This is a string. Also from the debug console, what I can try, let me take this particular value, right click, copy, go to debug console, and here you just paste it, press enter. So what we can see, this is just a string. This is not a person object. So the method that is returning the value over here is returning something wrong. Now what should be the resolution of this issue? That's a different thing. We need to go into the code, and the method which is populating the list, it should not be returning the string value. Or here what we can do, instead of directly typecasting, we can do a type check. That's a different thing. That's the fix. But for debugging purpose, the scenarios where there are multiple items and you don't want to iterate, you want to pause at a specific condition, there this conditional breakpoint using the expression becomes very handy. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to use exception breakpoints in VS Code. Now, I will explain this with an example. Suppose I have this particular code debug person details iteration, and when I'm running it, it is giving me some exception. So this is my class debug person details iteration, and it is calling this get person list with other data types. The logic is not very important, but at a high level, we are getting a list of person objects. We are trying to iterate on top of it. Let me run this. So as you can see over here, in this for loop, it is printing the objects, but after printing 3 or 4 objects, there is an exception. There is a class cast. String cannot be cast to this person object. So this is the exception we are getting. But the problem here is, here I have the print and everything. I know the fourth item has problem. But the problem is there could be huge number of items in a collection, and if some random items throw the exceptions, how to track them? Condition breakpoint is one way, but exception breakpoint is another useful way which we can try in VS Code. For that, what we need to do? We need to place a breakpoint? No. It's basically kind of setting. So I need to go to this run and debug. By default, it does not show the breakpoint view. In order to view the breakpoints over here, just create a breakpoint over here. You will get the breakpoint view. Anyway, we are not going to use this breakpoint. But what I'm going to do here, see, there are two options. In your editor also, if you come to the breakpoints view, you will have uncaught options, caught options. So what is happening over here? This exception, what we are getting, that is not caught. We are not catching it in a try catch block. So this is uncaught exception. We can enable that, and we can remove this breakpoint, or we can disable this. Now run this program in debug mode. Right click, debug Java. So here what you can see, the exception breakpoint has worked and the control is halted here. Earlier when we were running, what was happening? The exception was thrown and the control was gone. Now the exact place where the exception is occurring, there the program has paused. Now what it does, it gives us the option to understand the state, what is going on. I can see from the variable section, the count, that is I, is 3. So the third item is having some problem. Now I can investigate and see, okay, this is the third item, this is string. So what is the exact logic or exact problem here? That is not the important thing. The important thing is how this exception breakpoint can help us to debug and understand the root cause. So this is one way of using the breakpoint when we are having or facing uncaught exceptions. But there is a catch to it. What is the catch? I'll explain in detail. Let me enable this caught exception also and stop this debug session. So if you see uncaught exception, this is triggered when the exception is not handled by our code, then we use uncaught exception. Caught exception is something when the exception is caught, it should be handled. But let me try to debug the code now. Debug Java. You can see over here the error that we are getting is java.lang.class not found exception, right? So the exception is occurring, and what is happening, it is going into the JDK libraries in the Java lang package. So we can use caught exceptions, but the default setting in VS Code would not help us. We need to customize this a bit. Let me explain this to you with another example. I'm going to the Explorer. Here I have a sample program. Now this is my debug exception class. Here I have two methods. Method with exception handling. What we are doing over here, intentionally we are trying to create an exception scenario. I have variable I equal to 10, j equal to 0. I am dividing I by j. The exception would be thrown and I am handling it. So this is my method with exception handling. I have another identical method. This is method without exception handling. I am doing the same thing, but I am not putting any try-catch block. So if I run this program in debug mode, here I have this method without exception handling and method with exception handling. So this is method without exception handling, and if I go to the breakpoint, I just uncheck this caught exception. Let me debug this program. Click on run and debug. So wherever the exception is occurring, this arithmetic exception, the program is halted. It is working as expected. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to call this particular method with exception handling. So let me comment this, and what I'm going to do, if I don't enable this caught exceptions, the debugger won't care, right? It would finish as it was finishing early. Let me test that. Right click, debug. Now you can see the exception occurred, but the debugger did not bother because we have disabled caught exceptions. But now if we enable caught exception, same problem would occur. Let me run this again in debug mode. Click run and debug. Now again we see class not found exception. Why this is happening? This is happening because the VS Code framework is going into the JDK classes also. At that level, it is handling the caught exception. But we need to customize. Now, what to customize, where to customize, I'm coming to that. Here, first thing you need to go to View, Command Palette, and type Settings. Now, here you can see the default settings JSON, user settings. This is we are not going to use. We are going to use only the JSON version, and workspace settings. So I'm going to use the workspace settings, but for that I need the JSON. Let me type workspace. So this JSON file I'm going to use. Let me click over here. Now I have the settings JSON. Here I need to mention one option where I would tell for exception breakpoints, you skip the library classes, the JDK library classes. In that way it would work. If I press to double quotes and it is context sensitive, so let me type exception breakpoint probably. So here what you can see, java.debug.settings exception breakpoints skip. Basically it is about skip classes. Just click over here. By default it is giving you the option. Here you can mention what are the classes to be excluded. You can see there is a tooltip, skip the specified classes when breaking on exception. You could use the built-in variables such as $JDK and $libraries to skip a group of classes or add a specific class name, example java.star, start.foo, etc. Now I'm going to paste a particular string which we can use as a standard configuration. Now here this $JDK says skip the JDK classes, and here libraries it says the skip the classes like Maven, etc. Control S. Now I go to the same program, right? Not this one, but the other one. Where is it? Debug exception. Let me go to run and debug. I have this caught exception enabled, and I'm going to run method with exception handling. So debug this, click on run and debug. Now if you see, it is working as expected. It is pausing at the place in my code where the exception is occurring. It's not going to the JDK level classes and creating confusion. So if I stop this session and if I test this particular class also, what I'm going to do, the important thing is I should mention the classes to be skipped for exception breakpoint. That is very important. Otherwise, it would create confusion like it did earlier. And then what we can do, we can check both of these options and try debugging. Here also, it should work now. So click on run and debug. If you see, the class cast exception has occurred here and it is showing me, okay, when I equal to 3, then it happened. Anyways, it has worked earlier because our uncaught exception, when it was checked, it worked. But when we had caught exception checked, then at the system level, it was giving the class not found. Now, with the caught exception also, this is working as expected. So what we have learned, how to use exception breakpoints, number one, and within exception breakpoints, how to use this uncaught exception part and also the caught exception part, and how to customize the settings.json so that it works smoothly. So I'm going to stop this debug session. That is all for now. Thanks all. Log points are basically variation of breakpoints. In case of breakpoint, what happens? Wherever we place any breakpoint, the program flow pauses over there. In case of log points, the program does not pause. Instead, what we can do, we can add expressions on log messages, and accordingly what will happen, the log message that we have added, that would be printed in the debug console. The source code would not change. Let me explain this with an example here. In this particular class debug person details iteration, at line number 10, I am getting a list of person objects from an utility class, and from line number 12, I have a for loop. There, I am iterating on top of the list of person objects. Now here, if I want to add log points, what I need to do, I need to go to this section and right click over here. This is the option where we need to click add log point. Now here I can add the log message. Now the syntax of log message is a bit important. You need to put two curly braces. Now in this loop, suppose I want to print I. So let me add one comment like value of I, and here I am adding I. Press enter. Once I press enter, you can see this diamond like icon is shown. If I go to this run and debug, and if I see these breakpoints, here this breakpoint is shown with this particular icon. Now let me run this program in debug mode. So right click, debug Java. The terminal has appeared. You can see it got orange. Now you might have noticed the editor turned orange at the bottom. Now it's green. The iteration has stopped. If I go to the debug console now, you can see the value of I is printed over here. I should have given some semicolon. Anyways, now what has happened? The log point was hit. That is why the color of the editor changed, and the log messages that we have put, those values were printed, but we did not change the source code at all. So it provides us a feature where we can inspect the state of the variables or the values without pausing the code and without adding or modifying any source code. So here, let me modify the log point a little bit. Right click, edit log point. Apart from I, what I'm going to do, I'm changing the comment a little bit, and along with I, I'm going to print some value from the person object. So what I have done here, apart from I, I'm going to print the person name as well. Let me press enter. Again, run this program in debug mode. Right click, debug Java. Now in the terminal, you can see the color has changed. Okay. Now here I have made one mistake. If you see on the right hand side, the person cannot be compiled because I have placed the log point here, right? Now the person object is not still created. So that is why it is showing on the right hand side log message value of I and all this cannot be evaluated because the compilation error. So let me close this, and what I am going to do, I would edit this one. Let me copy the expression, remove this log point, and here I would add the log point. Right click, add log point, put this expression, press enter. Now we should not have the same problem what we had earlier. Run in debug mode, debug Java. Now the editor has turned orange, the log points are hit and the flow has completed. Let me go to the debug console. Here what you can see, the value of I is printed, the name from the person object is also printed. So whatever values we are getting in the name attribute, that is printed over here. So this is what is log points. The advantage here is you don't need to modify your source code to put any additional logger statements while you are debugging. So that becomes pretty handy in some cases, so that you debug, you get the state of the variables, but you don't put any additional code. You don't need to bother about the code cleanup after you do the debugging. Whenever a particular variable value is accessed or read or modified, then the editor could be notified during debugging session, and this can be done using data breakpoints. So it is a particular feature present in VS Code. Let me demonstrate this with an example. Here I have a sample code and I have this particular section at line number 26 where I am accessing the age of a particular object. Now there is a difference between data breakpoints and line breakpoints. Data breakpoints can be enabled or placed only during a debug session. Prior to that you cannot do anything. Suppose here I place any breakpoint in this particular code and run it in debug mode. Now the program is halted. So here suppose I have this person object and I want to add a data breakpoint on this age field whenever it is modified or accessed or whatever. Now what I can do, I can move to this particular line. Let me do run to line. Now the breakpoint is placed. Here I have all this first person, person map and etc. Now I want to know whenever this particular field age, whenever its value is read or changed or it is accessed, then the data breakpoint should be hit. The debugger should be notified. So let me enable this. Now what will happen, although I don't have any breakpoint over here, in the next line this particular field is accessed, and you can see in the breakpoint section I have this particular breakpoint, data breakpoint, that is person.age int. It is actually showing the data breakpoint that I have placed. Now here I don't have any breakpoint at line number 27, but still if I do continue, you can see here the debugger is stopping because the value is being accessed. So data breakpoint helps us to detect in a scenario when a particular field of an object is either read or accessed or modified. But again, it can be only set during the debug session by choosing the variable from the variable section, and from there we can add these data breakpoints. It's not like line breakpoints, like prior debugging the code you can set. You have to do it during runtime only. In this lesson, we are going to learn one advanced technique in debugging, which is run to cursor. So when we debug a particular program and breakpoint, what happens? The control flow pauses in that particular breakpoint. And from there, we have different ways to navigate. We can use step over, we can use step into, we can use continue. Multiple things are there. But suppose there is a scenario where I'm at a particular line where the breakpoint is hit, and after that there are multiple lines I don't want to execute. I want to move to a particular point and inspect that particular line. So in that case, there is one way to use another breakpoint in that line, or we can use run to cursor. Let me demonstrate this feature with an example. So I'm placing one breakpoint over here and running this program in debug mode. As expected, the breakpoint would be hit at line number 11. Yes, it is hit. Now suppose I want to move this to particular line, line number 24, but I don't want to place any breakpoint. One way would be, okay, the control is here, I place a breakpoint over here, and if I click continue, it should come here. But I don't want to add unnecessary breakpoints. I don't want to go through line by line using step over also, but I want the same effect, the same impact. So what I need to do, I need to select that particular line, right click, and I need to click run to cursor. So what will happen? Let me click. You can see over here, the line is paused. Although we have not mentioned any explicit breakpoint, but similar to a breakpoint, the control is paused over here, and if I want to inspect something, I can do that. So this all the lines between this particular breakpoint and line number 24 is executed, and the control is paused over here. It's kind of an invisible breakpoint, although the breakpoint is not there, but the effect is there. So whenever we are debugging bigger piece of codes and we want to navigate to multiple places, we cannot always place breakpoints because the code would be full of breakpoints, then we have to remove them again. So the scenarios where I want a custom movement and I want a feature like breakpoint, but I don't want to actually add a specific breakpoint, this run to cursor becomes pretty handy. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to run and debug JUnit test cases using Visual Studio Code or VS Code. For that, first step, we need to download a sample project, which I would be using in this particular lesson, and it is in https://github.com j2expert 2015/Java debugging with VS Code. So this is the project. You go there and you can click on this code button and download the zip file like you have done earlier. Now, once this project is downloaded, you extract to a particular directory. Right now, I have extracted it to this particular location. Now, I am going to VS Code and I'll point to this particular directory. Let me click on VS Code. So, my VS Code is already opened. Click on File, Open Folder, select the folder where your project is extracted. I'm selecting the folder. Click on Select Folder. Now here, you need to wait for a while because VS Code will scan the particular project and it will do the Java build internally. You can see in the beginning at the bottom, we can only see outline and timeline. Now gradually I can see the Java project. It is asking whether I want to install the Docker extension or not. I am not interested. So let me close this. Now we can see the Maven section also. As it is a Maven based project, let me just show you the project structure. Here I have the typical src directory source and the pom.xml. I want to show you the pom.xml first. Let me open that. Again, it is asking for the dependency analytic extension. I'm not interested. Let me close this. Now currently VS Code is scanning this particular Java project. Let it continue. Let me show you the dependency that I am using for the JUnit here. If I scroll down, we have the JUnit 5 dependency added in the pom.xml. On the right hand side here at the bottom, this opening Java projects message is shown. We have to wait for that patiently for a while. Now the message is gone. It is showing projects are imported into workspace. Let me close this. So the first thing that I need to do over here is do a Maven clean and install. I can do it from the terminal, but I can use this Maven section also. In the meantime, I can see some background task is going. If you see at the right hand side, there is a progress. It's still building. So let's wait for a while. I can click on show build status. Let's see. As you can see from the messages, it is refreshing the workspace. So let's wait for a while. Now we have a thumbs up icon. So it seems everything is complete. Let me go to the Maven section and do a clean and install, or rather I can use the terminal also. Let me do it from there only. Press enter. The Maven project is right now clean and installed. Let me close all this and let me show the source code. Inside main directory under util package, I have two utility classes. The logic is not important. I want to just showcase the JUnit run and debug functionality. So just assume these are two utility classes, calculator util and data util. Inside calculator util, I have some sample methods like add, subtract, multiply, etc. Inside data util, I'm populating some dummy list of records. I have this method get_data. Say for example, at line number 26, I have a method starting get_data. It populates few person objects and ultimately puts that into a list and returns. Similarly, if I scroll down, I have getEmployee data also. Here I am populating 4 employee objects and finally adding them to a particular list and returning that. So it's pretty simple. I have two util classes, and here inside the test directory, following the JUnit convention, I have the test classes for calculator util as well as data util, calculator util test and data util test. Let me open them. So here in calculator util test, you can see there are two test classes. One is add two numbers. It's validating the addition. Another one is disabled. It validates the division. Then I have data util test. Here also I have two test methods. One is validate presence of item in person list. What I'm doing over here, I'm getting the list of person from the get person data. Then I'm checking is greater than 0 or not using assert true. And the second one is validate employee data. Here it checks the list size should be equal to 4. So the logic, again I am repeating, it's not important, only showing the functionality is important. Now if we want to run or debug the JUnit test cases, we can do it from two places. One is the Explorer. Right now my Explorer is open. If you have the Java extension pack installed inside your VS Code, you would be able to view this green play icons. Now this green icons are beside the class. As we can see over here, there are double buttons, and this green play icons is beside the test methods also. Now if we click them, we can run the test. At the same time, it shows you click to run tests, right click for more options. If I do a right click over here, let's see, here it provides the option for run test, debug test, reveal in text loader, and many other options. So I can do run and debug from here. So at class level, if I do it, it will run all the methods. At method level, only the method that is selected. Let me right click again, reveal in test explorer. Let's click over there. Now on the left hand side, this is the test explorer view. Earlier I said I can run and debug from the explorer view. I can run and debug from the test explorer view as well. Now what is the advantage over here? You can see it is giving me the overall view. Here I can run a single class, maybe all the JUnit methods of a particular class. But here if you see, this is the high level, right? The project. Now this is the package. And these are the test classes. So what I can do if I have multiple packages, which are containing JUnit, I can run or debug from here. At the package level also, I can run or debug. Even at the class level also. And I can go to the granular level, individual method level. From there also I can run or debug. Anyways, just for test purpose, let me do one thing. Maybe here I can just place a breakpoint. So first what I'll do, I'll run it for all the classes. So let me click over here at the top level, or maybe even at the package level also. I'm clicking on run test. So on the right hand bottom, you can see run test is showing. Let's wait. And you can see at the bottom, it is showing running tests. Now in the debug console, the outputs are getting printed, and now the test run is completed. We can see all the icons, right, with check marks, meaning 3 of 3 tests are passed 100%, one is skipped. The one that is skipped is this one. In calculator util test, I have this one. In calculator util test, I have this one as disabled. That is why out of 4, 3 have run. One is skipped. So I have run it at the package level or project level. Now what I want to do, I want to debug. So I can debug it from here, but I need to place a breakpoint so that it halts. Maybe in data util test, anywhere I can place a breakpoint, right? It is already placed, fine. So I can debug it at the method level or at the class level also, or any level. Let me do it from here only. Right now it is debugging tests. Slowly the editor is entering into debug mode. Finally, you can see the breakpoint is hit. But one observation, as of today, this particular part is pretty slow. I mean, for running a simple test also, it is taking at least few seconds. Some performance improvement should be done. It can be dependent on my system configuration also. But anyways, so at a high level, what we can do, we can run and debug the JUnit test from VS Code from the test explorer view, which provides us many more features. We can do at method level, class level, package level, project level. We can do the same thing from the explorer also. But there, individual class level, if I stop it, let me show you. But there we can run it at individual method or individual class level. In case of Test Explorer, we have more flexibility. So now we know how to run and debug JUnit test cases from the VS Code. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to debug a Spring Boot application both from local system and also remotely. Here I have a sample project which is called Spring Boot Debug, and it is inside https://github.com/j2expert2015/Spring Boot Debug. Now here I have the master branch which has a pretty old version of Spring Boot. If I click in the pom.xml, you can see 1.4.0. So if you have Java 8 and an old version of Spring Boot. If you want to use, you can use this. But for most of the people, maybe they're using some newer version of JDK and newer version of Spring Boot. I have created a separate branch. I also have locally JDK 17 installed. So I'm selecting this particular branch. And if I go to this pom.xml, you can see this particular Spring version is used. So I'm going to download this one, click on code. You can see this particular branch is selected. So I have clicked on code, click on download zip. Installation is done. Go to the folder, extract it, right click, extract here, just rename this, and I'm going to cut it and paste it in a particular directory where I would point my VS Code. This is the directory. I have placed it. Now go to VS Code, click on file, open folder, select the project directory here. This is my Spring Boot debug. Just select it, select folder. Now, first let me go through the application a little bit. If I expand the source directory, the Java classes, I have this sample package com.example.helloworld, and this is the Hello World application class. This line number 9 contains the Spring application.run, where I'm passing this particular class, and this is my controller. This controller basically is a REST controller. It has two methods: to display default message, which is the default URL, and it returns a string hello world Spring Boot. And there is another method, display default message with parameter, where I can pass the parameter. Its by default URL is /hello. Finally, it would be returning hello world input is, then the input that I'm providing. So this is a very simple Spring Boot application, only created for debugging purpose. Let me build this particular project using Maven. I can use this Maven feature over here from VS Code. Also, I can use the terminal. Let me use the terminal. Now type maven clean install, press enter. On the right hand side, it is showing opening Java projects. Let me just expand this. Okay, it's gone. All these pop-ups I don't need, so let me close them. As the maven clean on install is complete, what I want to do, I want to run this particular project and then I want to debug it. In order to run it, if I click on this Hello World application, this is my main class. What I can do, I can click over here, run Java. So it's launching the main class. The Spring Boot application is starting up now. Let's wait for a while. Now it has started. Let me go to the browser, and here I have to hit the application URL. I'm just using the common URL localhost:8080 then /hello, which means the second method I'm going to use, and I'm passing the input as test Spring Boot. Press enter. So I'm getting the output from the application. Now here, if I go back to the VS Code, I can stop this and I can run this in the debug mode also. Let's click over here, debug Java. Again, the application is starting up. It's up again. Let me place a breakpoint somewhere. Maybe as the second method is called, I'm going to place a breakpoint over here and maybe here also. Go to the browser, refresh this. So it's waiting and the VS Code icon is blinking, and I can see over here the breakpoint is hit. So now we know how to debug a Spring Boot application locally using the VS Code. I can close the session. Apart from this way, what we can do, we can use the Spring Boot extension for VS Code. If you go to extensions and type Spring Boot, let me drag it a little bit. So here you see multiple extensions. You can use the Spring Boot extension pack, which will actually include all this, and click on install. It is getting installed now. So once this Spring Boot extension pack is installed, you can see this particular icon, Spring Boot dashboard. You can click over here, and what this dashboard has, as you can see, it has different sections: apps, bins, endpoint mappings, etc. Let's wait for a while it to load. So if we give some time for it to load, what we can see, it is showing the apps here. And if I select, it is giving me the run button, the debug button. So it is showing me the Spring Boot debug application, and from here I can run and debug. Same way I used to do earlier. So let me try to debug it. Here what it is doing at the bottom, agent lib, JWT, JDWP transport DTS, etc. Okay, let it be up, then I'm going to show you the command that it is using. So the application is started. If I scroll up a little bit, you can see over here it is using all the debugging related parameters that is required. So if I go back to the browser, refresh this page, you can see the breakpoint is hit and it is showing the parameter which is passed, which is test Spring Boot. So in this way, we can debug the Spring Boot application using this particular extension, that is Spring Boot extension pack also. Now we are going to see how we can remotely debug a Spring Boot application. So for that, I need a remote system. I have one. Let me go there. Let me check the Java version in my remote system. Okay, it's 1.8.0. We may have some problem. Anyways, let me see how it goes. I'm going to the URL where I have my GitHub project. This time I'm not using any other branch. I'm just sticking to the master. Click on code, download zip. The project is downloaded. Right click, extract here, remove the branch name, put it in a particular location. Okay, so this is the location. What I'm going to do, I have Maven installed. So I'm going to do a clean build and then run this. So let's go to the directory, do a Maven clean install. Now Maven clean install is complete. If I do a dir, I can see the target directory over here. Go inside the target directory, type dir again. So this is the Spring Boot -0.0.1 snapshot.jar. This is what we are going to use. So what I can do, I can just go to my old directory and I can try to run this particular application in debug mode. So here I can run the Spring Boot application two ways. I can use the java-jar command, or we can use this Maven Spring Boot run command also. There I am passing few arguments. The arguments are -xdebug, -xrun jdwp, transport equal to dt socket, server equal to y, suspend equals to n, and address is 8001. Now this port number is important because this is the port number which I would be using while I would be trying to do the remote debugging from my VS Code. Let me run this particular command over here. Click on allow access. Now this Hello World application is started. Let me go back to my host system. So here, if I want to debug my application, let me clear all this out. Go to Explorer. So I want to debug this. I have some breakpoints over here. That is fine. I need to go to Run and Debug. And here I need to click on Open Launch Station. So this is the configuration which I had for local run, but this is not sufficient for remote run. What I can do, I can add another additional one or get rid of this. You can just type attach over here, Java attach to remote program. So without typing the overall configuration, if I just use any of these words, right, attach or something, the option would become attach to remote program, attach to process. Let me select this one. So here if you see, type Java, name attached to Java remote program or whatever, request attach hostname port. So I have the hostname here. Let me place that. So the hostname is the public IP of the VM that I'm using. So I have placed it and the port would be 8001. Now let me try to debug this application. So click over here, start debugging. Now you can see this color is changed, right? It is changed to orange. I can see the call stack, but make sure whatever port we are using, right, the debug port of the remote system, which is 8001, and also the application port 8080, those should be open in the remote host. Otherwise this entire process won't work. So let me go back to browser, and here I'm refreshing this. So the breakpoint should be hit, and here that is why it is halting. Now you can see over here the cursor is blinking, and if I go to the remote system, let me see if there is any output. So it is listening at the transport socket DT. Just click on continue. Okay, continue again. Finally it is returning something over here, and I don't think I have printed anything, so it's just showing blank. So additionally, what I can do, I can go back to the VS Code and I can change the code a little bit. I can just add a sysout and see what happens. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the hotcode replace, and I want to print something. So click over here, applying code changes. So one change class is reloaded. Now this is going to be interesting because if I run this particular method, ideally it should be printing, and it should be printing in the remote system. Anyways, go to the browser, refresh, go to VS Code, step over, fail to stop because got some exception from the virtual machine. Anyways, let's try again. Attach to remote program, change the code little bit, 1 2 3, hotcode replace. Fine. Rather than stepping over, let me try to come here directly. Let's see how it goes. Refresh. Now it's blinking. So this line is done. Let me go to the remote host. So I can see hello remote system 1, 2, 3. Everything is printed. So the debugging is working. Finally, it is writing it into the remote system. We just use hotcode replacement just to show you, yes, whatever is happening, it is happening in the remote system, not my local system. So in this way, what we have done how to debug a Spring Boot application in the local system. Then how to use the Spring Boot dashboard in VS Code, and also how to perform a remote debugging using Visual Studio Code. So that is all for this lesson. We will learn more interesting features in upcoming lessons. As per VS Code website, hotcode replacement is an advanced feature the VS Code debugger supports. It is a debugging technique whereby debugger for Java transmits the class changes over the debugging channel to another JVM. It can be another JVM, it could be same JVM, doesn't matter. Now, with this new feature, you can start a debugging session and change a Java file in your dev environment. And the debugger will replace the code in the running JVM. So, suppose you are running your code, you are debugging your code, and you have your editor, right? It is using one JVM and you are running it in a server. Now, you make the change in your local file and use the feature HCR or hotcode replacement. Your changes would be transmitted to the environment where your program is running. So, let me illustrate this with an example. Let me go to my editor. I have a sample Spring Boot web application named Spring Boot Debug. I have two sample classes, one application class, and this is a controller class. The logic is pretty simple. This is a standard controller. It has two methods, both having a mapping. This has the default mapping. Here I am printing hello world Spring Boot hello HCR. Here I have one method where I am taking an input parameter, and finally in the return string message I am adding the input that is provided. Now this application you can get from this GitHub link, which is github.com/j2expert2015/springbootdebug. You can download the code from here and set it up in your system. In order to demonstrate the HCR, let me run the application in debug mode. So I'm selecting this application class and running it in debug mode. The application is starting up now. Let's wait for a second. Now the application is started. Let me go to the browser, paste the application URL, press enter. Now you can see the default method which I had, it is printing something. If I go back to the editor now, suppose this is the method and here I want to make some changes. Let me make some change. So I have just added this particular section, made change 1. Here, as it is running in debug mode, on this top bar, if you see we have this icon, this is called hotcode replace. If I press this, then the changes that I have made would be transmitted. HCR would be done. I have not restarted my server or application. It is as is. Let me go back to the browser, refresh the page. You can see made change 1. Let me go back to the editor once again. Let me press the HCR button once again. Now it will tell me cannot find any change classes for hot replace. We have not made any change, right? So it cannot do any HCR, any hotcode replacement. Let me make another change. Ctrl S. Press the hotcode replace button once again. Done. Go back to browser. Refresh the page. You can see made change 2. So it is a pretty simple but very useful utility whenever we are debugging any project and we don't want to restart our session multiple times to deploy our changes. In such cases, any changes in the Java files can be replaced dynamically using this feature.